Hey friends, I just want to give you a quick trigger warning about this particular episode. In this episode, Skye and I are going to be talking about a lot of different aspects of erotic transference and countertransference, including discussing some non-consensual sexual experiences inside and outside of the therapy room. If that's going to be hard for you to hear, please feel free to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, including just plain skipping over this episode. Take good care of yourselves. Welcome back to Untangling Intimacy. How about the question of what do I do when my client has sexual feelings about me? I think a lot of therapists worry about this. If I start talking about sex in therapy, somebody's going to feel uncomfortable, or I'm going to feel uncomfortable, possibly because somebody expresses attraction to me or hits on me in some way. So I thought it might be a good idea for us to dive into this super, super juicy topic. What do you think, Skye?
I am totally game for talking about this, and I can neither confirm nor deny that I might have some personal experiences to share.
I think that's probably true of all of us. So a client hitting on you is very normal. You don't need to be afraid of it. Let's get into it.
Okay, here we go. So, Martha, what do you think makes a client respond to their therapist in that way, that they feel attraction or that they would actually hit on them? What do you think that's even about?
Oh, geez, I love this. So the way I think about this is when I'm a therapist for a person, so I'm in a therapeutic relationship, I'm in the role of therapist. What I'm doing is holding up a mirror to my client. I'm reflecting back to them. I'm giving them a lot of undivided attention, a lot of positive regard. I'm reframing the negative stories in their heads. I'm trying to help them build self-esteem, combat their shame, reframe their experiences, find a path forward that's meaningful to them. Like, what's not to love?
When you put it that way, will you marry me? I mean, yeah, great point.
Exactly. So when I think about this, that is not a relationship that somebody is having with Martha. That's somebody who, I mean, you can Google Martha and you can learn a fair amount, but they don't know me. They don't know what drives me, what lights me up, what my challenges are. They don't ever see me at my worst. And none of the content of the time that we spend together is really about me. Even if I share something about myself in the way of a personal disclosure, it's in the service of the work I'm doing for them. I am serving them. And so there's a way in which I'm not even in this picture. So whatever they're feeling about me is at least in part a projection, and it's about them. And when it comes to something like attraction, which I think like a genuine relational attraction requires that you actually see the other person. And
Yeah.
I am not visible to my clients in that way. So when it's about attraction, it's not about me. When it's about what you just said pissed me off, that is about me. But when it's about attraction, I am invisible in that, really. What do you think
Wow.
about that? How do you think about this?
Martha, this is something I've thought about before, but I have to be honest. I don't think I've ever thought about it or heard it put in such a way that is just really crystal clear and not confusing. So I'm going to be greedy here. Going to be greedy. I'm going to admit that I'm going to be greedy and just ask, could we slow this down and hear it a second time? And I'm going to pick out some of the pieces that really made my ears perk up. this is not actually a personal attraction, is what I'm hearing you say. Did I get that right?
Yes, or at least it's not relational.
Mm-hmm.
So a person might be attracted to somebody's body, the way that somebody looks, the way they
Sure.
present, the way they smell, the whatever. There could be just a purely physical attraction, like my body is in the room.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's not relational, like I see you, I know you, I get you. Because what I'm doing, the magic trick I'm doing in therapy is holding a mirror up and helping. I'm 100% centering somebody other than myself, helping them figure out what they want for themselves and how they might move toward that, what experiences they want to have, how they might want to shift things in their life. And then I'm offering support and helping them work through whatever their blocks are. This is just not about me. It's not
Mm-hmm.
about what I want for breakfast. It's not about my grumpy mood. It's not about the fight at breakfast. It's not about anything that has anything to do with the day-to-day real me, the kind that you would say, oh my gosh, I get that. I get that.
Yeah. So another way that I'm hearing it is the attraction is almost to the role. Like when you're watching a movie and maybe the actress in real life or the actor or the person acting is playing this role that is really all the things that jazz you up, all the things that would mean something to you as an individual. And you might be attracted to that role, but it doesn't necessarily mean that if you met the person in real life, in real time, with them being themselves, that that attraction would hold. This is how my brain is kind of hearing what you say. What do you think about that? Am I
Yeah.
tracking or am I misunderstanding?
I think you're tracking, and I think there's also more because this role, I mean, it's part of how I want to show up as a therapist for me to be quite authentic. So there's authenticity and relationality in how I'm working with my client, but I'm fairly invisible in that.
Mm.
And what's not invisible is them. And so part of that role as you're conceptualizing this is it's all about you. Every interaction is about your thoughts, your feelings, your history, your blocks, what's going on for you. It's all about my client. And that is not something that we experience that much in day-to-day life. And it is really fucking attractive.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes, yes. So, true story, and I might say more later. I have asked a number of therapists that I've worked with, wish we could be friends outside. Is there any way we could be friends outside of here? And as a therapist, when I'm asked that question or questions about more than friendship, the answer is, of course, always no. But this just kind of highlights and magnifies exactly what you're saying. So even know that, the therapeutic relationship is confined to the therapy space. I have found myself wanting at least three and I've had long-term therapeutic relationships, but I'm in my 50s. So there's been a few. Even knowing that, I have felt the pull to take the relationship outside of the therapy space. And again, I hadn't thought about it this way, but I think it's for exactly the reason that you just espoused so beautifully. And to piggyback on something else that you said, and just to hog the mic for a minute more, when you said the piece about authenticity, I think that's really important because we may have some people listening who are not therapists. We may just have interested, and I hope we have interested parties who find their way to hear us. And I think it is really important to highlight the fact that no, it's not that I am pretending when it is not just a role. It is more than that. I'm bringing what is in me forward in a very focused way. So I have these traits, but maybe when I'm dealing with my partner, or my partner's wife, because I'm polyamorous, I might not be so focused in what traits I'm bringing forward and the amount of focus that I have on the person in front of me. But in the therapy space, all of that other stuff falls away. So it's almost like they get the best of my traits and my clinical expertise all wrapped in one. So thank you for that clarification, because I do think it's important. And I have had clients specifically ask me, trying to scratch at, okay, are you really like this? And I'm always very quick to say, oh, no, see me at the grocery store. So I do want to help them differentiate and understand that, no, this is not the full-time 100% only version of me. But there is sometimes that curiosity. So I want to speak to that a little bit. And thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. As a client, I have wanted to be friends with my therapist. And as a therapist, I sometimes want to be friends with my client.
Thanks for saying that. That's true too.
And so maybe I'll tell a personal story. Is that okay?
Yeah, I totally want to hear, and I bet our listeners do too.
Okay. It's not quite as juicy as you think it might be, but I used to be a midwife. As a midwife, I was not ethically bound as tightly as I am as a therapist. So it's perfectly permissible to be friends with your midwifery client. There is not like an ethical problem there. And it's also not quite as tightly boundaried. Like, imagine a conversation where you sit down with your friend over tea. How are you today? And you hear a big story. How are you today? You hear a big story. That is not what happens in the therapy room. If there is a question of how are you today, it's a one-way question. And if my client asks me how I am today, I'm going to keep it to a bare minimum because it's not my time. This is not like you're paying me to give you my divided. Okay, so midwifery is not that boundaried. You're doing a home visit, you're visiting, you're talking about life, you've got an agenda and stuff you're working through, you're a leader and you're a guide, you're a lifeguard, all these things, but you're also sharing space and time in a more relaxed way. So in the course of my midwifery career, there were a handful of times when I felt a close relationship with a client and they wanted to pursue it into a friendship, or I was curious about that and they were curious about that. And I only really tried this a couple of times, and I always was very aware, like, this is a slightly unbalanced relationship. Like, I should probably keep an eye on this and make sure it's not going to cause harm to somebody else. But ultimately, what I found is we would go out for tea or we would have a visit or something. They didn't know me. Like, they didn't know anything about me, and they didn't have a habit of asking. So it ended up feeling super one-sided because I knew a whole lot about them and their struggles and their blocks and their relationship and their family life and their extended family life and all of the things. I've probably met some of their and they don't even know I have a female partner. Like, they know nothing about my life. They do not know how many hours a day I work. They don't know how anxious I was about sleep because I never got enough of it. They might have asked me if I had kids or not. They surely did not ask me if I had a female partner. So like, right. And so I would have this very dissonant experience. And that's how I learned this. That's how I learned what countertransference and transference are about, was how invisible I felt. And I was like, holy shit, I'm not even here. I would have to be quite assertive. You know what? In order to balance this equation, I need less power and you need to know more about me. Like, both of those things would have to happen.
That is
Does that make sense?
Yes. And it is so incredibly astute to be able to, I could see myself in that situation trying to figure out, like, okay, why doesn't this feel as good as I thought it would feel? So very astute to come into connection with, this is the dynamic that's happening. They don't know me. Wow. Very good. Yeah. So I think what we're surfacing kind of right away is this isn't always just about erotic transference. This can also be about friendship. And we know there's a loneliness crisis. We know that people are having a difficult time building connection in the world. And like you said, you are in that specific, I think you used a better word than role, but you're in that position, that mirror, and you have all that focused attention and what's not to love. So when a client might hit on a therapist or a coach, are you inclined to think that it would be that therapist or coach's fault? Because I'll admit, sometimes I will disclose something and I'll be like, oh, why did I disclose that? That gratuitous? And I think in that situation, it might be easy to think, oh, this happened because of that. So are you one to inherently say, hey, if this happens, it's because the therapist didn't really hold proper boundaries? Or where do you stand on that?
This isn't the kind of thing that I would put a label like fault on.
Mm-hmm.
This is a human relationship thing that happens. I was intrigued when you said, yeah, I wondered why that didn't feel as good as I thought it would feel. Oh, imagine what it would be like to go into your therapy session. In fact, I've experienced something like this and I didn't like it. Tell me if you've ever experienced this. And your therapist tells you a big, long story about themselves, like a big story that has nothing to do with you. I'm like, what am I paying you for?
Yeah. I have had that happen. And I've also had the therapist recognize that they're doing it. And then I think, okay, good. Now we can focus on me. But instead they keep going.
Yeah, right.
Oh man. Okay.
Exactly.
So,
I'm asking that question because I'm thinking, okay, if you're a client and you're a little crushy on your therapist, first of all, I just want to super normalize that. You can see now why that would be, right? Seriously, what's not to love? There's a way in which I think it's astonishing if somebody isn't a little awe-inspired by their therapist because it's just a long period of unbroken attention and attunement. And for many of us, it might be one of the first areas in our life we ever experienced attunement. Somebody actually saying what's important to you is important to me. Wow. And we can't be their parent. Like cognitively, we get it. Like there's a reparenting thing probably happening, but you don't relate to somebody who's in sort of your same age bracket as a parent mostly. Right. But if they're kind of in your age cohort, then that makes them kind of dateable. Mm-hmm. But if that describes you, picture how fun that date would be when you're sitting down over dinner and your therapist is telling you all about their shitty day and how worried they are about this long worry list. And then they've got also a to-do list. And then they show probably some of their interpersonal challenges that they have that you've certainly never seen. And you're going to be like, who the fuck are you?
What the hell?
What the heck is happening here? This is not the person that I knew. And it's because you didn't know them. It's just destined to be disillusioning.
Mm-hmm. Really. And interesting to me that you said fault. It has nothing to, it's not a word that you would bring into the situation at all. You'd have a lot more curiosity than that. And how did you say that? It's a human relational thing to think about it in that way. And I think that's really helpful.
So what you just said is important, I think, to have some curiosity about this. So it's a very provocative question. What would you ask? How would you be in this conversation when your client says, I'm attracted to you? Where do you go with that conversation? So I think we've made it clear you don't want to be reactive about this. You don't want to be judgy. You certainly don't want to shame them. There is no fault to be found here in you or in them. This is simply an interaction between humans that's expectable. And then where do you go? I think you go to curiosity. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
I also think curiosity is the go-to. And for me, when this has happened, I'll be honest, I've needed a moment. It doesn't happen all the time. So it's still to the point where it's a little bit like, oh, that just happened. But noticing is really valuable for me to kind of slow everything down, because undoubtedly there's some risk for the client who is saying this. And I'll just ask, can we notice what it was like for you to say that? Now, I'm not talking about something that is like wholly, undoubtedly, unquestionably inappropriate. I'm talking about, would you ever consider going out on a date with me or something like that? Or even, could we be friends outside of here? I wanted to invite you to coffee and I really think it'd be nice to be your friend. So something like that, not something really, really that goes there into the sexual realm. But I'll ask, can you notice what it's like to say that? What's happening in your body? What are the thoughts that you're telling yourself? What thoughts are you having? It's another way to put that. And what are you feeling? And can we just be present to that? And that helps me kind of figure out where I want to go. And it also helps them step into a moment of awareness. And I might say, can we explore what's coming up for you? But before we get too far in that line of questioning, I might say something after we notice. I might say something like, my relationship with you means a lot, and we need to keep it here. This work is important, and you've sought me out for these services, and I want to be able to provide those services to you. So I may or may not go into ethics and rules. I have before. When I do that, it just feels, I don't know, it doesn't feel good when somebody's taking a risk to throw a bunch of the ethics book at them. So it's very unusual that that would be my go-to right off the bat. At some point it might come in, but it's like somebody's taken this huge leap and you're like, on page 62 of the ethics manual, it says never, ever, ever should I do this. And I've got it in my paperwork too. So I could say, you signed a document that, like, boo, like, yuck. That would be like so non-relational to point people back. So I have these kind of outs, but for me, they just don't feel really that relational, and they don't get at what the person in front of me, what this, human being in front of me is really after. What are they saying? What are they trying to communicate? And if I can help them connect with what it is that they're after, I think that's going to be a way bigger therapeutic moment than citing ethics. So that's my stance. So I invite us to notice. It helps me to kind of settle. It buys a little time, to be perfectly honest. And it invites them into a level of consciousness of what's happening in their body as they're taking this risk. What are they hoping for? And so, what, I'll probably very early in that say no with a little bit more gentleness and cushion around it. I want to continue to be the person that hopefully I've been all the way through our therapeutic relationship before I get to the direct answer. And for me, a lot of questions are answered with, can we notice? Can we just notice? What is this part in you hoping for? What does this part that is wanting this have to teach you about what still needs to be healed in your life, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a long answer. Why don't you jump in?
Guy, that's beautiful, 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 beautiful work. I'm going to grab these and highlight them because this was so just gold. What are you hoping for? What is it that you're imagining would materialize that would be rewarding for you? What can you learn about what's important to you? What can you learn about what might be missing in your life that you might want to try to call in, nurture, find, create with awareness? The piece that we might build is awareness of the direction you want to head, why it feels important to you, and how to create that in a way where you can actually get it, which is not with me. So what we can do is use this thing that's happening between us to craft a better experiment or move forward for you in the direction you want to go once you get a little clarity about what that direction is, and we should look at how would you do that in a way where you get to actually reap the reward, where you find, for instance, a friend or a partner who is available. That's not me. Who is reciprocal. Not me. Not in a power up position with you. Not me. Like, there are a number of fatal flaws if we were to become friends that we would have to somehow deconstruct and surmount. And I don't think it's a winning proposition. And I do think there's a lot of room to cause harm unintentionally, which is why there are ethics about this. So I might talk about that. I'm not going to cite the ethics because I think that's a cop out. The question is, can I actually explain why this is not going to serve you? And yeah, I can explain. You are learning about yourself, something about what you want, and you want to have that in a way that you can actually have it. And I'm exactly not that. And that might be something to really unpack. Like, how can you tell? How can you discern? How can you set up circumstances so you can learn if this person is available to be emotionally available to you? How can you figure out if this person has time availability, has attention for you, is interested in a reciprocal relationship? How can you suss out what is the power dynamic between you and another person so that you don't get yourself in a relationship where you're unintentionally in a power down position? Those are some of the conversations that I think could come out of it.
Yeah, you are the perfect podcast mate. I adore the way that you just make sense out of sometimes ethereal, flowery concepts, and you put them in these bite-sized pieces. I've said this to you before, maybe even on air. You put them in these bite-sized, accessible, easy to understand pieces. And it is just, to me, such a great compliment to each other. So yay, Martha. And thank you. Thank you for being that for me. So,
well, and yay, Skye, because what you're doing, I mean, you're sort of calling this ethereal, but I don't want to undersell that. Like, you have such a focus on heart and relationality. And I think I can err on the side of crisp and coherent and miss the, oh my gosh, let's just take a breath and notice what just happened here, because that was a big thing that you just said. So you are also the perfect podcast companion. Look at us.
Yeah. This is a very loving moment, and I am here for it, by the way. So I think I want us to go back to this fault question. So we're debunking the idea that it's inherently fault. I'm going to go on record and say, if you want to take a scan and ask yourself, okay, is there something? Personally, for me, I am one who loves looking at, and I have like my scorecard in life doesn't include D's or F's. So literally, when I do anything that I want to improve or work on, there's like a super smiley face, a smiley face, a smirk. There's no negative grade. I am so gentle with myself most of the time. It's a practice that I put in place several years ago and have built to kind of a zero bullying, self-bullying policy. So with that, it's really comfortable for me to say, okay, let me take a look. But I'm not assuming fault. I'm not shaming myself. I'm not blaming myself. It's just, okay, let me take a look. Let me see if maybe there was something. I can look at that with some curiosity and interest. So still not talking about fault, but a willingness to, just like I would with any other thing that I do in therapy, like, oh, that intervention didn't land. Let me take a look. Let me see what I might be able to do differently. So this all feels very light for me. I hope you could even hear in my voice. This is not a heavy, shameful thing. And I'm willing to have gotten it wrong. So if I find something, then I can make that correction. But I too agree with you that fault is a really interesting word and certainly would not be the first place that I would go to if and when this has happened for me. I think fault is also an interesting word because it really assumes full responsibility. It doesn't talk about anything that might already be in the client's erotic template before they ever even got to you. So, let's just be really hyperbolic and say you are doing therapy behind a wall and it's only your voice that they hear, but somehow, because of their erotic template, an attraction develops. So when we think about fault, it doesn't leave room to look at all of the other possibilities. And it doesn't leave room for the client to be able to understand themselves more. So I'm really trying to show here how useless having that be the first place that you might go would be.
Yeah, I think you're right. Exactly right about that. I think when we're looking to assign blame, we are already saying there's something wrong with this. And I just don't think that there's something wrong with it. That said, I like your little conversation there about accountability. I picked my own word for it, but I think, is there anything that I did that I now with the information that I have now would do differently? That's very different than did I make a mistake?
Yeah.
I didn't have more information then. Now I have more information. Oh, well, that sheds a whole different light. And now I wish I wouldn't have said that. That I think, sure, just don't beat yourself up over it. Don't go too deep into that. But then I think we have to talk about the really accountability piece, because I think there exists a possibility that somebody doesn't really understand why that ethical guideline is in place in the first place and wouldn't be able to back it with any kind of logic, doesn't understand the harm that could be caused in that way, and would really be okay with building a whole outside of therapy relationship with a client because they don't think that it's a thing that is problematic. And so I do think that in that case, it's likely that something's going to come up that's going to cause you to take a look at it. And it would be really important to do a little research project. I've had this conversation with some coaches who don't have the same kind of ethical guidelines. So, like, I might say, well, as a therapist, this is my training. What was your training? And opening up the idea that this is a relationship where there is a little bit of an inherent power imbalance. Somebody's coming to you as an expert because they think that you have something that can add to their experience or that can help them or in some way gives you a lot of influence. If you're not comfortable with the word power, try influence. Yeah. So they're paying you money, in some cases a lot, for you to influence them, for you to give them your opinion, your perspective, your history, your viewpoint, and your particular professional learnings, right? That's power and influence. And that's an imbalance. So then if I become flirtatious with a client, which sure could happen, I've certainly been attracted to clients, but if I develop any flirtatiousness around that, there's not a safe container for that because of the power imbalance, because they've paid me for influence. And from my viewpoint, I'm just a human. So I'm not going to feel that power imbalance. And they may not feel it in a crushy stage of things, but when the shit hits the fan, they're going to feel it.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So this is sort of Martha's little ethics lecture. Sorry about that. From the Department of the School of Hard Knocks, trying to help you avoid just getting large brick dropped on your foot by yourself. And different professional licenses also have different guidelines about this. And so I want to surface that too. And I'm quite confident that for myself, I am not interested in getting into a relationship that could harm the other person and has complexities around power imbalances and who's centered and how, and then what could go wrong. So any relationship you might get into feels really good right now. What could go wrong? We've all had a bad breakup. That could happen.
Hmm.
and you're in love and it's exciting and it's alive and it's juicy and you cannot imagine anything negative. I want to say, imagine your
Yeah.
worst breakup with a person who was your client. They're going to sue you. So I'm just saying, like, what could go wrong is a very good question to ask yourself. And if you think, oh gosh, like this is starting to surface a whole different level of things, and now I'm starting to wonder if I am being flirtatious, I would say that's an opportunity to really to take a look, because it's always a good moment to be like, oh, whoops. And if you're thinking Martha and Skye never had moments like that, I can just debunk that immediately. There have been many times when I'm like, oh, fuck, that was a mistake.
Yep.
Whoa, really hope that doesn't come home to roost. I'm going to just be crossing my fingers and saying my prayers, getting supervision, covering my ass, documenting the hell out of this. Whoops. And then the trick is learn from that. So I don't know. That's enough of the
And
cautionary
move
tale, maybe.
forward. Yeah, I'm going to jump in here and learn and move forward. Don't keep yourself on the hook. Over a career of how many years, mistakes are going to be made.
Right.
And you're more likely, well, I believe we are more likely to learn if we're not utilizing all of our energy feeling bad about ourselves or shaming and judging ourselves. So if you can redirect that energy that would have gone to what's wrong with me, I can't believe myself, what have you, you can redirect that energy into, okay, what's my plan moving forward? Then I think it's going to be great for the clients who are in your care. So that's attention to countertransference. Right. So we're looking at transference and we're bringing in countertransference and saying, it's our responsibility to do our best to keep our eye on all of those things and turn whatever comes into the office into a therapeutic moment so that the client can learn and know themselves and understand their motives. And, like you said earlier, Martha, how can we utilize this information to help them find someone who is actually available in a real and meaningful way and sustainable? Because I certainly couldn't be who I am as a therapist for anyone full time. I can do this and I can focus 100% and I can hold that mirror up. Yeah, for 50 minutes, for 85 minutes, but for 24 hours, for 36, 48, and on and on and on. No, you're in for a lot of disappointment.
Yeah, beautifully said. Let's pull out of the ethics part of this and go back to how the heck are we going to handle this in the therapy room, and how would you not be afraid of it?
So I'm going to say, instead of how could you not be afraid of it, I think I like a little bit better. How can you build some confidence that it's something you could handle, even if afraid? So, and the reason I want to change that language a tiny bit is because, we do have those fearful parts. And I think sometimes trying to not have them is harder than just saying, okay, you're here. What are we going to do about it? So hopefully listening to this conversation is helping you come present to, okay, what would my fears be? And I'll say what some of mine would be, that I would be super clumsy about it, which has happened around this and many other things in the therapy space over the years that I've been practicing. Another fear would be that the client's feelings would be hurt and ultimately lose the client, that they wouldn't want to see me. Another fear might be that, like, I liked it. I liked being affirmed in that way. Oh shit, I'm not supposed to like this. I'm supposed to have this astute clinical judgment. And oopsie, and there I am not having it. That maybe some of my own countertransference would show up. And maybe the client would be able to see through me. So, I think just these are a handful of things that might show up for me, and some of them have. So what's the plan? These very human responses show up. How am I going to be in relationship with myself? And that's an accountability piece that I hold really highly, that I'm doing my own work so that I can handle fears that show up in the therapy space. And whether we're talking about sex and sexuality or we're not, and I'm going to go out on a limb here, and maybe this is true for you or maybe it's not, but I find that talking about sex with clients has not made me any more likely to be hit on than not. As a matter of fact, if I look at my data, I think most of the clients who have expressed a romantic interest in me are clients that we had not even discussed anything about sex and sexuality. So if that's floating around in anybody's mind that, oh, you increase the likelihood, I can just say from my experience, that has not been the case. I don't know about you. What do you think, Martha? Do you think it inherently increases the likelihood that somebody's going to develop a romantic attraction just because you talk about sex and sexuality?
No, definitely not a romantic attraction. However, I do think that there's a whole other category of like sexual action. So I think that some people confuse talking about sex, talking about arousal is different from being in a state of arousal. And some people, that is a very fine line. And maybe the way that they handle stress is through arousal, or maybe arousal, sex, pleasure. Let's just go with arousal for the moment. So getting an erection or getting lubricated, wet, puffy erectile tissues, that kind of physical response, it's not really under our conscious control. It's under our unconscious control. And yet it can really freak a therapist out. And I do think that talking about sex can be sexy, can seem sexy. Being in a frank conversation about orgasms when you've never had a conversation about sex, now you're talking to a therapist who says clitoris and vulva and penis and scrotum and touching and frenulum and pleasure and how do you stimulate this part or that part, and here are some anatomy diagrams. Like for some people, that is a sexual interaction. It's the line between that and sex is kind of a slender one, I think, for especially for somebody who hasn't had that experience before. So I think there is a way in which it might be opening a door a little bit. It's not opening a door to having sex, though. It's opening a door to talking about sex. And it, in my experience, this possibly a cohort effect, possibly who my clients are, hasn't happened a ton, but it has happened, and it has been fairly frankly sexual when it has happened. I've definitely had people who want to be friends with me. I kind of put that in a whole different category. I'm thinking of sexual transference here, where like when somebody reaches for me and touches me, or when somebody is clearly self-pleasuring on the other end of the phone during a consult call, or something like that. So they're confusing a conversation that centers them and that includes their sexual pleasure. They're confusing that with a consensual sexual interaction. You so kindly and generously sort of delineated. I'm not talking about like big examples here. I'm now kind of edging over toward bigger examples.
I hear that.
And they do exist. And what I love, though, about what you said is you can be afraid and you can still move forward. You can have some anxiety about this and some nervousness about it, and you can still move forward. And I want to just contribute my main go-to strategy for that is if you can see it coming, like if you're hearing this and you're thinking, whoa, that would be super hard for me, start rehearsing now. If somebody puts their hand up on your thigh, if somebody is leaving your office, holds your hand for too long, and then touches you in a way that feels inappropriate. If somebody is self-pleasuring on the phone when they make a consult call, if somebody starts to self-pleasure in your therapy room. So if there's a thing that you're imagining that a client might do or a potential client might do that would make you feel uncomfortable, let's make a list. This is my first idea. Like make a list of things that make you feel nervous and then start figuring out how would you respond? What might you ask? What might you say? Where's the therapeutic opportunity? Remembering that this is not about you. And my hope would be that you can find a way to respond that doesn't shame the sexual impulse. There's nothing wrong with somebody having a sexual impulse, and there's nothing wrong with them showing you that they have a sexual impulse, it's an opening to a therapeutic opportunity where you can say what you need to say about boundaries, but maybe first look for the therapeutic opportunity. So my go-to strategy is practice, practice, practice. If I can imagine that it might happen, I'd like to figure out my response, and I like to memorize it so that it doesn't feel like I'm quite so backed into a corner in the moment. Because in fact, remember, you have the power here. So I think it's important to remember you can find a therapeutic opportunity here and keep yourself safe and not shame your client. I wonder what comes up for you around all of that, Skye. That was a lot.
It was a lot, but it was a lot because, well, two things. Let me be a little bit more. This is a stretch in transparency, but I'm saying yes to it. It reminds me of something that did not involve a client that I could not figure out how to handle. I was on an airplane and traveling alone, 3 seats. I was on the window seat. The middle seat was empty, and there was a male-bodied person, looked maybe 19, 20 or so. And I had been dozing, in and off throughout the flight. When, as I was coming to, just glanced over and saw that this person was watching a show and a woman was coming out of the water in a bikini. And it happened to be a really cool bikini. So I looked a little bit longer, like, wow, that's really pretty. Great color orange, all the things. And then I felt, not physically felt, but I felt the awareness of like his hands moving really fast. And I looked and one hand was in his pants. And they had just said, we're getting ready to send, your flight attendants are going to take a seat, all of this. And I could not, as a sex therapist, this was not 15, 20 years ago, as a sex therapist in the moment, I could not figure out what to say or what to do. So this really bodes for your comment about practice, practice, practice. Now, of course, I didn't see this coming, but in the therapy space, we might have, if you're worried about this, then it is worthy of practice. But I really had no clue what to do. I knew I didn't want to shame this person. I knew that it was not okay for this person to be engaged in this sex act in public space. But I was also thinking about the other passengers, the flight attendants, that they, needed to sit down and all of this. So he finished rather quickly. And then he wiped his hand on his seat. So just FYI, when I told my friend this, she said, all the people who I've judged over the years for their baby wipes and wiping everything down, I'm now wishing I was one of them. But alas, I digress. So he was one of the first to get off the plane, but I did make the flight attendant aware. And, that haunted me for a while, that I didn't have a way to deal with that in the moment that was satisfactory to me. And that the confluence of everything I know about seemingly late adolescent development and shame and the normalcy of attraction, arousal, masturbation, all of these things colliding with, this is a public space. There could be a marshal on the other end of this plane ride. Like if I reported this potentially, I don't know if that's true or not. But where I'm going with this long-winded, very interesting story, in my personal opinion, is that even as a sex therapist, I didn't know how to handle it. Practicing is a great idea. Asking yourself to know how to handle things on the spot in the therapy space that might be something of that nature, something that is more tipping over into the like, what category, is a worthwhile thing to do. So first of all, let me take a breath. Pulling up that story, man, oh man. And I want to check in on you. What happens for you when you hear that this happened?
Well, my heart goes out. This is different than if it happened in a therapy room. So what happened on the airplane for you that's causing me to feel empathetic and protective of you is that you were pulled into a sexual interaction without your consent.
Yeah.
And I am so sorry that that happened to you.
Thank you. It was very confusing, and all of the things that people feel when they're
Mhm.
pulled into a sexual interaction without their consent. Yeah.
Mhm.
Thank you for
Mhm.
that.
Mhm. And then if it were in a therapy room, the difference is you have some power to seek a therapeutic opportunity. Like, I wouldn't be making a therapeutic confrontation of a guy sitting next to me on the plane.
Right.
I would be setting a boundary about consent. That's a super different situation. And I'm so grateful that you brought this up because I think I've consulted for a lot of therapists who wonder how to deal with erotic transference like this.
Mhm.
And it's tricky and kind of fraught. And a very, very common pitfall, especially for feminine presenting therapists, is to confuse this with the airplane scenario.
Mhm. Mhm.
To
And I
feel
think the reverse of that is what kind of happened to me.
right. I imagine so, right? So
Mhm.
you wondered, like, how would I set a boundary here? Can I set a boundary here? What do I do about sexual shame? It's not your job to protect the guy in the
Right.
airplane seat from sexual shame. It's your job to protect yourself from being pulled into a non consensual sexual interaction. In
Mhm.
my therapy room, I work for you to not have sexual shame and to understand what's happening inside of yourself so you can find a more adaptive way of going about in the world. That's not my job on the airplane, but
Beautiful.
it is my job in the therapy space, and I am empowered to do it.
Mhm.
So I think that these two circumstances have a similarity, but they're not equivalent. And they're often conflated and confused to the detriment of the therapy client and the therapist, who then feels violated in the therapy space. And while it might be quite stressful and a lot to handle, my hope would be that if you can figure out how to use the therapeutic opportunity, you could avoid feeling violated and
Mhm.
instead feel like, well, that was a really hard day at work,
Right.
right? So for the before I sort of we go into that and unpack it, what do you think about that distinction? And how does
Well,
it
I think,
feel as a person who was in the airplane seat? Like, I just want to be gentle with that. That's an experience.
yeah, a couple things. Let me just slow myself down and be here for myself in a way that's meaningful. And I'll just acknowledge for our listeners, there's some real vulnerability here. So, first of all, I feel gratitude that you recognize the airplane situation for what it is, that there's not this dismissal of kind of like, oh, gross, oh, God, oh, that is totally fair, a fair reaction, but it doesn't really get to the heart of what a violation that was. It's kind of like an eye roll response, but it doesn't help the person that it happened to. And let's say you're not here, for that, but we do have a relationship where we care about each other. So that response means just a ton to me. And I think the fact that my brain pulls that up when we're talking about a totally different situation and scenario is really a learning opportunity for me and for our listeners because these things do happen in the real world. We do have these moments where maybe we were exposed to something on TV that stuck with us or that we carry. And so it's important for us as therapists to be keeping track. I said it before, some of the best things that we can do, the best work we can do involves having a self-care and a self-awareness and a self-engagement practice. And so this is an example how if that unfinished business from how that hit my psyche and how that moved through my emotional and psychological filtration system is still lingering and then someone does something in the therapeutic space that feels adjacent to that, I might have this big reaction, like you said, where I feel violated. And that is not exactly what's happening. And I miss the therapeutic moment because of my unfinished business. So I want to name that I agree with you. These situations are very different, but I think what we just saw happen as we're talking about a client solo pleasuring in a session or being able to hear that sometimes, our brain can go places and make things feel like a threat that might not be a physical threat. Like you said, yeah, this is uncomfortable. Boy, this was a doozy. Where's the wine? Where's the foot massage? Where's the spa after the session? But it is not the same as that interaction on the plane. So I love that differentiation. I absolutely feel, as my peers and co-human beings and co-podcast hosts, that you are hearing and being sensitive and kind and generous in how you respond. But the teaching moment is also very valuable. And I'm so glad we didn't miss that.
You're so generous. Thank you for your vulnerability. It's very beautiful. Many, many therapists have difficult sexual experiences in their past or in their present. And we are whole humans doing the work that we do. And I'm starting to wonder, like, is this just going to scare the heck out of our audience? I think, hopefully not, is all I can say.
Something.
Yeah.
It might scare the heck out of our audience. And I agree with you. I hope it doesn't. But if it does, I want to just extend an open-hearted invitation to stay with us, to stay with your own curiosity that's bringing you to this podcast. And we will try our best to hold all of this content with gentleness and humor and information and all of the ingredients. So if you find that you are activated, first of all, self-care, self-care, self-care. Please don't pretend that you're not, or please don't feel like you have to be braver than what you are. And if you're scared, please give yourself permission that if there are parts of you that are still curious, come on back. We're getting into some deeper waters in this episode. You certainly don't have to tread these waters to still be able to operate on the willingness that was already showing up in your system to say, I want to be able to be a space where I can open up these conversations. So, sorry, Martha, I got a little excited and I cut you off. Let me give you the floor back.
Perfect, 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 perfect. We're talking about things that I'm not talking about the airplane now. I'm talking about the therapy room. And there are common and uncommon things that come up in the therapy room around erotic transference. I personally have never experienced a client of mine self-pleasuring in a therapy session. The only therapist that I personally have had a conversation with about that is a guy. And it's possible that that has something to do with the culture around that happening. I don't know. A common experience that I have had and that I have heard of a lot of people having, particularly femme presenting therapists, is to have a consult call and to have somebody clearly self-pleasuring on the other end of the phone. Have you had that experience, Skye?
I have not ever had that experience.
This is a little closer to the airplane experience because you don't have a therapeutic relationship with this person and you're being pulled into an erotic interaction that you didn't consent to and presumably wouldn't consent to. And that's a situation where I simply would set a boundary, but I would do it warmly. So I would say, it sounds to me like you're self-pleasuring while we're having this conversation. I would rather talk to you when you're not doing that. So why don't you call me back at a different time? So I don't want to say what you're doing is bad, sick, wrong. I'm not going to put a pathology on it, but I am going to set a boundary and say, I'd like to have this conversation when you're not doing that. So if you want to have a conversation with me, call me at a time when you're not self-pleasuring.
So clear and so boundaried and so non-shaming.
And that is entirely my goal there. But it's all about the boundary. if I did, and I have not had the experience of somebody self-pleasuring in my therapy room, I would probably say, what is going on for you now? How did you decide to put your hand in your pants? And how are you imagining that that's going to affect me and affect the work that we're doing here? What are you trying to communicate to me here? Let's try to put it into words. And this isn't the place for that. So let's find the words to express what it is that you're hoping I'm going to actually get out of this. I wonder how that sounds to you, Skye.
Also, really well said. And I have asked myself if I felt threatened physically, which has never happened. So this is still assuming that the client is still in the client seat and all of that. What would I do then? And even with that, I still don't have the exact answer, but I do know that if there was a physical safety issue, which I think is very different than feeling emotionally threatened, and I want to keep bringing that to our attention, that feeling uncomfortable is very different than physical safety and being boundaried. They all have a really important place in therapy. But I love what you said. What are you trying to communicate? And can you use words to do it? Because this is not the place for this type of interaction. So it's still very clear. I hear you turning up the boundary language more than over the phone. And I also, in my opinion, it is appropriate to turn up the boundary language a little bit more. I think I heard a little bit more firmness in your tone with the second one than the first. Did I read that right? Or is that just kind of happenstance?
I don't know. I mean, I am in the therapy room. I'm curious what place self-pleasure has here for this person. And my assumption is that it's serving a purpose. And I'm curious what purpose it is. Is it self-soothing? Is it communication to me? I'm going to guess it's probably self-soothing or anxiety management. And then we can talk about anxiety management strategies that are more relational. So there's nothing wrong with self-pleasure. And when you do that, this is our link into the airplane. The thing about self-pleasure or any sexual act that you might do is if you do it in public, you're bringing people into it that didn't consent to it. That's why we do it behind a closed door, so that we don't involve non-consenting people. It's not because sex belongs behind a closed door. Who cares? Except for we don't want to bring in people who didn't say yes. So let's talk about how you can get whatever the need is that you're fulfilled without involving somebody non-consensually. And the reason that's therapeutic is so that you can have more success in the world. You know, if you're at the bank and you start to feel anxious and you put your hand in your pants, you're going to get arrested. So it would be protective if we could figure out what purpose is the symptom solving for you. How can you solve it differently? And then because there are two people in the room here, we will also need to solve it relationally. And I am willing to be a sounding board for you. You can ask me, if I did this, would it feel more comfortable? If I did that, would it feel more comfortable? What would feel appropriate? What kind of anxiety management would feel appropriate? And I may be talking to somebody who has never self-soothed in any way other than self-pleasure. Or who knows, there are like many other things that could be going on here as well. But my point is, it's a symptom that's serving somehow.
Yeah.
And there's a relational misfit here. It's not a good relational fit to bring somebody in non-consensually. But as a therapist, I don't want to say, this is a consent violation, get out of my office. I might say that to the guy on the plane. But in my therapy space, I'm going to say, I think this is a symptom. What do you think is going on for you? And would you mind taking your hand out of your pants while we discuss it?
Martha, this is a masterclass. And I am going to go commercial out of the left field. You know, for our friends listening, really, this type of consultation and this type of information is available for, you know, if you like what you're hearing, this is unplanned, but I really want to say this is why I ended up in Martha's ATSIP course, and this is why I stayed in consultation groups. because I'm in relationship with other therapists who are interested in having these types of conversations, and we learn from each other, and we learn a whole heck of a lot from Martha. So just beautiful, Martha. So in admiration of the way that you just walked us through that piece. Beautifully done.
That's so kind. I really want to stress that this is not something that is going to happen all the time. It's not.
If ever.
The heavy breathing on a phone call, maybe. The self-pleasure in your therapy room, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. But consent is a theme, and it's a theme worth revisiting. It's on my list of things that I think that we should go deeper into in multiple different ways in podcasts. Because, like, for instance, maybe some people just learned, like, oh, so that like Mile High Club, public sex on an airplane, that might be a situation where I might not want to do that because it might be involving a bunch of people on an airplane into my sexual experience, and that might actually feel like a violation to them. So there are just sort of next level consent conversations that I think it would be important for us to continue to touch on and to come back to again and again. How do you feel about that?
Well, and I think we can commit to letting our audience, our listeners, our friends know that we're not going to shy away from these complex conversations. So keep on listening, please, and thank you.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's call this one, Martha. I think we've given everyone plenty to think about. If you want to follow up and find us, ask questions. I think we've said before, we may not get to everything that we're asked, but we sure do want to pay some attention to what kinds of things are showing up for you. In the meantime, please take good care, everyone.
Hey friends, if you're listening to us talk about working with sex issues in therapy and wondering, gosh, how in the world would I actually do that? I have something for you. It's a 15-week online course called Assessing and Treating Sex Issues in Psychotherapy, but it's not just for therapists, it's also for coaches and other helping professionals. And it's designed to help you get all the way from just starting out to really comfortable and confident and competent working with sex issues. You can learn all about it at the link in the show notes. And if you want to learn more about working with consensually non-monogamous relationships, I have an in-depth course that you can take at any time. It's called Consensual Non-Monogamy Level 1. And once you take it, you actually qualify to join a consulting group with me to get help with your CNM cases. You can get 10% off the course with a special code just for podcast listeners, which is Untangling Intimacy. You can just enter it in the shopping cart on my website.
If you think you'd like to work with me, you can find me, as always, at workwithdrskye.com. I'd love to hear from you and support you in your relationships. Thanks for being here.